We're delighted that Shikhar's got the perspective from Harvard Business School. He's also the board member of a public traded company. Melissa, you've got quarterly goals, you've got changes. How do you manage all these different masters?
Well, that's what we do, right? Anybody out here is doing the same thing. I think, when it comes to AI, one of the things we did really early on was focus on change management, and we're seeing the benefits of that now. So we had said we want to make sure we're investing in enablement, which meant giving people tools, but also we required all directors and above to learn prompt engineering at that point in time, but learning how to use AI and open it up to all of our employees. And then we had certain people that were set up to create an AI incubator program across the organization. As a result of that, right now, 3/4 of our employees use AI weekly. 80% of our employees are encouraged to and say they would like to learn more and are continuing to learn more. We have 600 of those incubators that are across the organization that are advocating for that. And you can see, John had talked earlier about bottoms up and tops down. We think of that as working in both of those areas in the company. So the bottoms up is grassroots, but it started with making sure people understood the tools.
That's great. We hear a lot about kind of the early adopter employees taking off and the next segment kind of stagnant. Are you seeing that, and
yes.
How are you managing that?
Yeah, early on it was just making sure people are aware, and then from a gentle push from the board, we went from value creation to value capture, and so that's when we started to really focus in the areas, and that's where we started going tops down. And we're seeing things like we've got across our business, one of the things our customers do is submit claims to us that we actually have to process. And it's a pain point for our customer, it's a cost for us. We now have a program where when people submit flexible spending accounts, we can reimburse them in 2 minutes, or approve it, I should say, in 2 minutes compared to 2 days at 97% accuracy. So we've been able to change that from a customer perspective. 32% of our fraud claims are being blocked, in greater velocity than they have been in the past. You can go across the organization. Our IT group has 10% productivity across all of their different use cases, and so I feel like we went from education to value capture, and now you're seeing the force of both of those things. We just did a hackathon in one of our segments, and we had 70 AI-inspired ideas that are coming through.
That's great. I'm curious, and I want to go to change management. What are you seeing other companies in change management, Shikhar? It's something we were seeing again and again. CEOs saying, boy, my company's not going fast enough, we're not moving fast enough.
I think the main thing is that every time we've had change management, whatever form that's taken, you end up that the biggest problem you run into is primate behavior. That humans are primates, and in that process, people have egos, they have fears, they have concerns about where they will be, and you have to start by addressing that. So you're taking somebody's expertise and saying, I'm going to put that into a model, and in that model, eventually, I'm going to take away this person's job, their livelihood, their expertise. And you have to address that right up front. You have to start to say that this is going to affect everybody. The example that comes to my mind is Moderna, down the street from here, Steve Vancell, and his decision to put IT and HR into the same department run by one person, with the idea that the job of the HR person is to create workflows, and that those workflows will include both AI and humans. And you have to figure out how they work together for the good of whatever the objective is that you're trying to achieve. And increasingly, I think we'll have this notion of these are different intelligences, but they have to work together, and they do certain things differently. And so organization styles, all of these things will start to change, but we don't know the path forward.
That's great. Can we get the wireless mics? We'll do questions about 5 minutes here. Melissa, I know one thing that's so impressive about WEX, you and Shikhar had board meetings discussing AI way back in 2023, which seems like ages ago, and I think back then it was like maybe less than 5%. So you've been on this journey to this AI land, John Tabak, for a while. What do you know now that you wish you knew 18 months ago? What's the next one coming up? What advice would you give? Yeah.
You know, I think that we kind of stumbled into it, honestly, this idea of all the work we did across the employee base. I think that if you look across, if you look across our employee base, that training we did it because we thought it was the right thing to do. But when I talk to other CEOs, the biggest thing that they're dealing with is just resistance within the organization. What Shikhar said is real. And we've also talked in two different ways to our employees. First, it's a journey that we're on. We're removing the chafe out of what you do, and it's going to change the way that we work over time. It's going to give us a competitive advantage, but it also will change what happens on a daily basis. And you can see within our workforce, we have more people in the audience here are highly trained experts, and we have less people that are doing more manual day-to-day work, and that's going to just continue over time. So I guess what I would say is what I've learned is, lean into the truth.
Lean into the training.
Lean into the training, lean into the truths. And then we started with very much a carrot idea. We wanted to draw everybody along, but we've realized we've had to add the stick along the way. And some of the examples of that within our IT group, we started with wanting people to use tools to help them code. And then we started tracking who was using it. We started talking publicly about what was working. And you can start to see over time that we created a shift in behavior.
So all employees have access to a secure employee chatbot years now at WEX, right?
Yes, years in many different tools. I think that's the other thing is instead of forcing people to one tool, we have multiple options so you can find something that fits your style.
For the audience who doesn't know, the tables here in front of us are groups from different companies. There's some of the WEX teams here, Gemline's team here. So these are companies investing in a whole table in 2 days to get alignment here. So it's another change management aspect that you have here. And then we'll go to questions after Shikhar. Shikhar, we hear a lot about AI changing competitive dynamics here. How do you think about sustainable advantage? Is it change because of AI? Is people need to think differently?
I think it's one of these questions that you just don't know, because if you think through it logically, you end up with something that says that anything that was sustainable before in terms of scale or the Porter's 5 forces kinds of things, that those things all disappear, that it's all stuff that is about process, and it's about the pace at which you move. What we are seeing across a range of companies that are trying to think, Andrew Ang was talking about this, that the primary metric that he looks at is the velocity of change, that how quickly are you going from one place to another. And the example he uses is he says, I'm building a system. I started in the morning. I use a set of AI systems to write the code. The code is ready by the afternoon. I go back in, and now I've got to debug the code. And instead of going in and saying, here's a place that there's a problem, go back and fix this, I just say, here's a problem, rewrite the whole thing. And it's just a different way of thinking. It's a different way of working. And by the evening, I have another set of code. And the system has learned something about what it did wrong the first time and has improved on that. And so, the logical conclusion to all these things is mind-blowing. But it's a very different way of managing processes. It's a very different way of thinking about how these things work. And that's what management, that's what people have to learn. One of the big problems is how do you communicate that, particularly if the middle layers are doing all the learning and the top layer is doing the listening. Because it's different, if you don't experience it, it's very hard to then incorporate that in the way you decide things.
And just to add to that, if you look at a lot of the grassroots work, people are trained to think incrementally. They make incremental benefits. And a lot of what we're doing that I would say that's kind of bottoms up is that someone will take a process and they'll remove the chafe from it, but it's just taking what they have and they're making it better. A lot of the tops down work we're doing is the opposite, where you're actually thinking, what can the tool do differently that we couldn't do in the past? And that's where you're seeing really big change.
That's great. Questions, audience, who's got a question here? While we get the next question set up here, Melissa, we talked a lot about the change here. How are you thinking, or are you thinking differently about the core competencies you need in your next set of leaders, employees, and board members and everything else. Is it different now? Is it still the same?
It is different. It is different. And I think that it's really important tops down that you have believers.
Yep.
And you can see in
Believers.
Believers,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because not every, like, I think it's really easy, and Shikhar will say this, to find the excuse
Yep.
around why the technology doesn't work. I don't have access to the data. You know, there's a, you know, the running list of why it's too hard. But if you start with a belief that this is going to change the way work gets done, it's going to change our competitive position. And for us, what we believe is it's going to change how we are viewed in the industry. Like, we're a market leader, but we have an ability to actually just create new ways of working within our industries. And so it's a really exciting thing. But if you don't believe that, then you're actually going to have that ripple down through your organization. And one of the most powerful things I do is use it. Because when I
Yourself,
start,
yeah.
myself, but also like visibly use it,
Yeah.
and so that people can see we've created a synthetic investor. We've created synthetic board members before. You know, like, there was different ways that we've actually used the technology, and so that people can see it in play. And I think that puts tension in the system too.
That's great. Questions? Go ahead in the back, looks like.
Hello. Hi, Larry Fitzpatrick, CTO, One Main Financial. It seems like at the CEO and board level, there's a spectrum of responses from let's wait it out and see and maybe we'll buy it at some point, all the way to I'm all in, what can we do to actually transform our business? And you can imagine stages in there from, well, let's test it so we're not going to fall behind, or, you know, let's look at some big hitters and some small hitters. What are the triggers along the way that get CEOs and boards to flip their perception to maybe go a little bit faster and lean into experimentation when, you know, in operating businesses, experimentation is maybe not baked into the culture?
You want to start, Shikhar, and we'll go Melissa? Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I can start.
Yep.
You know, I think that the pressure from the board is really important. And because as you started with this, as a public company, you have a lot of things we can work on. And so making sure that there's time and space and a board agenda where you're focused on that. And we actually did board education and continue to do so at the board level, because this is a really important strategic topic and something that warrants time and energy at that level. And that has just, you know, like, it just ripples through the rest of the organization.
I think a simple way to think about that in my mind is just project out 2 or 3 years, you know, within a planning horizon, and you say, if I take all the processes or the products that I have, and I assume that AI does its thing, what will that look like? How long will it take to create a quote? How long will it take to evaluate a contract? And those answers are typically in minutes, you know, sometimes seconds. And you go back in and you say, if that's the way the world is going to be in a time frame that's within my planning horizon, then what do you know, if my competitors are going to do that, how do I respond to it? And so you create a very concrete set of what does service look like in my industry based on what I know AI can do today. And once you do that, it sets a performance, that's your competition. You know, that's what you're going to be competing against in terms of performance requirements. And then you start to work it through. Now, you can spend a lot of time debating whether that's true or not, but that's a good debate to have. And once you do that, then that sets the requirement for moving ahead.
One thing, we get fortunate to talk to a lot of different companies here. Private equity is driving a truck through this here. So if you're PE owned, you got a lot of pressure there. The other thing is, I know it's hard to get on the board agenda here. Employees notice. So we've gotten multiple resumes from major companies who are frustrated because their company's not going fast enough, asking us who do they know that's moving faster here. So I think it is non-trivial to get on the board level, but it's also shocking when you're in some of these board meetings and people are asking about 3.6 in ChatGPT field. Let's go over there, a question, and go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was really intrigued by what you said about paradigm shift from Porter's 5 forces to sustainable competitive advantages being rewritten as processes. I was just wondering if you could not so much give examples, but just talk about that at a strategic level. What does processes mean within that context that you framed it?
So I think one way to think about this is that in most companies, you have standards. You say that I will respond to a call within a certain period of time. I'm expecting that my sales cycle will take a certain period of time, and so on. And over time, you try and tweak those things little by little along the way. And what AI starts to do is to say that instead of going from step to step, what I'm doing is going on a gradient that is continuous. And so for each of these things, the end point, so right now I'm going to respond to a requirement for a quote within 2 weeks. And it's going to become, I have to respond to that within 5 minutes. So it's radically different, but you're not going to get from 2 weeks to 5 minutes in a short time because you've got human processes in between that come in. And so you say, I'm going to start at 2 weeks, and then I'm going to bring it back to 1 week, and then I'm going to bring it back to 1 day. And that might be as much as I can do. But you work through each of those processes, and you say that becomes a standard in the industry. And if you don't have the AI underpinnings, if you don't have the data structures, if you don't have the ability to say yes, the review processes, all of the other pieces in it, then you're never going to get there in that process. And so what you want to do is to take every process that exists and then meta processes on top of that and get to that level at which is sort of the limit of what can be done, given the natural reviews and so on that have to occur. And I think that this notion of I have a competitive advantage, or I have a cost advantage, or I have a slightly better product, those things become, the time frame in which they're occurring become narrower and narrower. And so you have a few weeks of competitive advantage instead of a few years of it. And that keeps changing continuously.
And we've got investors, both public and private, asking us how to look at 15 competitors in a sector and figuring out who is AI first, because they're getting 10 to 15% valuation premium on that here. And UBS can be targeted. Let's go over here for a question. And we're about 5 minutes late in the agenda here. When we get to break, we're going to catch up on break. So we're going to make up the 5 minutes of break. But go ahead, Hope.
Hi, I think these are all great insights. What I'm noticing in companies right now is that there's a position they're starting, every company I hear, is that the chief AI officer. And I think they're hiring such positions just to make sure that the change management that you talked about is actually taken care of pretty quickly, because the technology is advancing really fast. And I do want to hear your insights on if the technology is moving really fast and everything is advancing fast, like ChatGPT, you have every 3 months you have new advancements coming out. How do you take that and put that into change management in such a way that you're training your employees? It takes 3 to 6 months to train them, and then you have this new technology coming in. So how do you make that happen? Do you have these new roles like chief AI officers do that, or do you do that in the change management as a team? And how do you take care of that?
Sure, that's a great question. So when we first started, you were talking about the fact that we educated people. That was really on prompting. I mean, the next thing for us is agent creation. And so when we think about broad brush training across the workforce, it actually isn't every few months. It's going to happen periodically. What we really want is our employees in it and using the tools. And as long as the tools continue to evolve, our employees will evolve with them. And you can see that. So we have probably 50, what I would describe as AI professionals, within the 6,500 employees. So there's a deposit of them, but then we have 600 employees that have really taken this seriously and are really deep in that. And they're advocating within each of their different departments, the usage of the tools. People can go to them and really understand, what's happening. And so it is, when I talk about grassroots, I think there's a level of formal education that's going to happen on a regular basis, but more often it's going to be people just immersed in the tools, and as they are immersed, they're learning how to do things in ways that they couldn't in the past.
Well, yeah, I'm going to finish up. I've got one kind of exit question I want to ask both the panelists, and then we'll move to our next speaker here. We'll start with Melissa. Melissa, what's the one piece of advice you'd want a company to know that's on this journey? What's the one thing they need to take away from everything you've learned?
Yeah, I think I hear a lot of people talk about the risk of AI.
Yeah.
I think that I would say the risk of not deploying AI is actually much greater. So, and it's taken us 3 years to get to this point in time. So I would, if you're not in, go in, and go in as fast as you can, because I think it's really important to the future.
That's great, yeah. Shikhar?
So, I'm really going to key off your question. When people come in and they say they want a chief AI officer, I'd like you to imagine, what does the spec for that look like? And typically, what a spec would look like is somebody who knows AI. And I think the shift that we have to see is not somebody who knows AI. That's just a given. It's somebody who knows people. Somebody who knows the human side of it, because that's the side that has to change. AI is changing, but the organization also has to change. And so in change management, someone who knows how to change an organization, how to change minds, how to do all of those things, that becomes a spec of what happens. And it's still framed as a technology thing, as opposed to a change management thing that has to occur within companies. I think that's the big shift that we're going to see over some period of time, and that's going to distinguish companies that apply it successfully versus companies that don't.
Yeah. Shikhar, Melissa, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.